Tienes que brengen of ik?
Nee, meer zeker. Kijk.
Okay. Okay. This evening we have the second session in our series of 6 talks on Rabbi Hasdai Crescas, Critic, the great critic of the Rambam. And the topic today is there a mitzvah to believe? Mitzvah of emunah. Is there a mitzvah lahamin? This is one of the most famous discussions in Sefer Or Hashem. Is there a commandment? Is there a mitzvah to believe? And according to Rav Hasdai Crescas, the mitzvot concern actions, not beliefs. Mitzvot ma'asiyot, they concern actions, not beliefs. All the mitzvot are what we have to do, not what we have to think or believe. The Torah is very practical. Mitzvot concern deeds. Moreover, he argues that it's not logical to say that there is a mitzvah to believe, because I can say to everybody, okay, I command everyone to lift up your right hand. So everybody, you can all lift up your right hand. It makes a lot of sense. But it would be a little funny if I said, I command you to believe that I'm commanding you to lift up your hand. Because if you didn't believe that I exist, it would make no sense to speak about a commandment. So the Crescas it doesn't make sense to say that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is giving us a mitzvah to believe in Him, because after all, what does it mean to accept a mitzvah from Him? To accept the mitzvah means that we're recognizing Him. You can't have a mitzvah without a mitzvah. If you didn't previously believe that I existed, if I said lift up your hands, then you obviously believe that I exist. And because Rav Hasdai Crescas has 3 arguments against the mitzvah to believe. One is the logical argument, that it doesn't make sense to say that Hashem is commanding us to believe, because before we can say that He's commanding us, we have to believe that He's commanding us. That's the first argument. The second argument is a psychological argument, that you cannot command the beliefs, right? I happen to have taken this Canada Dry to drink it, but maybe I really wanted instead to get a Coke, and I made a mistake and I took the Canada Dry. Well, can I say, I want to believe that it's a Coke? No. Hasdai Crescas says, in beliefs, you can't control your beliefs. Beliefs are forced on you by what you know. I can't believe that this is a bottle of champagne. I can believe it, I can say, but I can't make myself believe that it's a bottle of champagne. You can't force yourself to believe something.
Could you maybe say a little bit what do you call, what Crescas call the definition of belief? What means believe?
Well, to hold a proposition, but let me just say, for example, I used to explain to my students, anybody who can believe that this gray wall is red will get an A in the course without having to do any work. But you can't force yourself. You can't force yourself to believe that the wall is red. We believe things that are forced on us by what we know and what we've experienced. And
I was asking, what does it mean believe? Belief is experience. Belief is knowing. So what do you call
acting
the word
as
belief?
if?
What do you call belief?
to hold a proposition to.
So it means knowing.
To know.
So what do you call belief?
Well, we're
Belief means knowing?
Well, this is really, of course, the question: what is meant by belief? Generally, we say to belief is to hold a proposition even when you don't have proof.
That means to act as if I hold it, or like to internally believe it?
Well, belief means several things. It also, of course, means to trust. Usually, in the Tanakh, when in the Torah, when it says belief,
Anshe Emunah.
right, Anshe Emunah, right, Vayaminu b'Hashem. Vayaminu b'Hashem doesn't mean Am Yisrael believed in His existence, but it means that Am Yisrael trusted Hashem. Right, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdo. It's not that they believed in that Kadosh Baruch Hu exists and Moshe Rabbeinu exists, but that they trusted. They had trust. So emunah, generally, in most cases, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, is close to bitachon. It's close to bitachon. But there's also, emunah is a very general term. It also can mean to hold a proposition that I believe that there's water in here. Of course, maybe it's vodka, or arak. It could be a lot of things in here that look like water. Until you drink it, you really can't tell. So you can believe something means to hold a belief.
But you have general indications to that, meaning it's not
Right.
believing against all odds. There are indications. You just don't have 100% proof.
Right.
So the Rambam could mean that you should research the subject and put yourself in a position where it would be reasonable for you to believe that there is a God.
Right. However, we have. We're going to speak about the Rambam in a minute, which is the occasion for Hasdai Crescas' comments in the Sefer HaMitzvot. But the fact is, we have the Rambam's own official translation of Sefer HaMitzvot in Hilchot Yesodei Torah, where he translates all the time. He uses the expression all the time, leida, yediyah, to know, and that's so. We'll come to that in a minute, and there's a comment for those who have the New Hebrew translation of Rav Kafach, that he has on the beginning. He has edition of Sefer HaMitzvot with the Arabic and his own Hebrew translation, and right at the beginning he emphasizes that he's translating the Arabic word itikad. He's translating it. He has maybe I even cited his note over here. Did I cite his note in my thing?
Number 2, yeah.
Oh yes, right. See the note of Yosef Kafach. So he writes that he's explicitly translating the term by leda'at, lida, yidiyah, and that's the proper translation of the Arabic. The Arabic term is irtikad is a general term which means to hold an opinion, which could be
Hold a proposition.
right, to hold a proposition. Yes.
In your example, when you tell the students that the wall is red, well, I wouldn't believe it's red because I think you're saying it in jest. You're joking with the students, and I would. But if I think you really mean it, and I know you're a highly acclaimed professor, well, I would start thinking maybe there is something to it. Maybe on a pixel level there is some red in it, and I would be able to convince myself.
It wouldn't work for the Rambam. No,
You're checking in.
I think it would be more likely that you would think that maybe I was crazy or something.
Well, of course, if you're joking, if you really
No, but it's true that people can be influenced to believe. That's true. But I think if you're looking at it from the point of view of the Rambam, there are two kinds of people. There are those who you can influence them easily to believe something, and there are those who you can't. And Rambam doesn't think it's a good thing that you can be easily influenced to susceptible to have your views changed. But so let's look at the two passages from the Rambam, and then we'll go into look at what Hasdai Crescas says about it. The basis of this whole idea is in beginning of Sefer HaMitzvot, the first mitzvah Taseh Aleph, Ki hatzivui asher tzuvenu b'hamanat, and that's the Arabic term itikad, elokut, to believe in Hashem. That's what the Rambam says, to know Hashem, to have the correct opinion with regard to the existence of Hashem. V'hu shenamin sheyesh sham ilah v'siba. There is a first cause, ilah v'siba. Hu poel kol hanimtzaot. This is how the Rambam understands the pasuk. Anochi Hashem. Hashem means the first cause of everything. Elokecha, Elokim for the Rambam means the poel, the manhig, the governor, the actor. So basically, when he says Anochi Hashem Elokecha, it means I, the first cause, am also the God who operates in the universe. So that's how he understands the Hadiber Rishon, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I, Hashem, and the Tetragrammaton Yud Hey Vav Hey means first cause. It means the Rambam understands that that Yud Hey Vav comes from the root to be. Havaya, Shem Havaya.
Existence.
I mean, there's some question about it whether it really does or not, but Chazal never say that it does, right? There's no place that Chazal says that that Yud Hey Vav Hey comes from the root of to be.
Oh.
You have it in your view.
Chazal never thought of God but Ilah. And they thought about
Elo, never had
personal
Ilah.
God.
No, of course not.
Had a personal God.
But the idea of that the Shem HaMeforash, the Shem HaMeforash comes from to be. We have it in Ibn Gvirol, we have it in Atbash. Rashbam writes it in Atbash, right? Rashbam, of course, on the pasuk writes in Atbash that Yud Hey Vav is the same name as Ehiyeh, but it's in the third person.
I don't know if everyone knows if you get
But Atbash is everyone knows.
No, but what the Rambam does.
Rashbam writes in the
Rambam
middle.
doesn't want to write it beferish. He's scared a little bit to say this is the meaning of Ekes. He said, "I'm going to write an Atbash, and you figure it out."
Right, the Rashbam in the
It looks
middle.
like he thought that a person that is so stupid, a person who knows Atbash is not going to be so stupid to think that it's so bad to say such a thing.
Right. Which is, I mean, it's not the most difficult code to break. Most
Only lazy people think it's stupid.
Right. But it shows that he didn't want the casual reader to know what he's writing. The Rashbam, in the middle of his Perush, he writes in Atbash that Yud Hey Vav Hey is the same as Shem Ehiyeh, but it's third person instead of first person. He writes it all in Atbash. Most of the printers get confused. So, but if you figure it out, that's what it is. And also Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Ibn Ezra has it. Yudah Levi has it in the Kuzari. So, and then the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, and of course, it also you can see it also in the beginning of Hilchot Yesodei Torah. That the whole idea, the beginning with Shem Hashem. Okay, but I see that some of the Chokrim today have doubts about what that is. That's really the.
Do they have alternative?
What?
What's the alternative understanding?
Because they think it's a god.
It's
Meaning it's a name of
it's a name of a god.
There's an essay.
They don't have a different meaning.
There's an essay you can
They
find.
don't think it means
Andere meaning. Alltså stämmer nummer kan mening.
Yeah, but there's an essay that you can find on the net by Yisrael Knoll. He's been here.
No, he's a very big.
He's very big. He says it comes from the word for love. Comes from the word for love.
In which language?
In some ancient Semitic language.
It says the Shema Meforesh is Ahava. That's what it says in Bris Menucha.
Right, so it's not only a drash. Okay, back to the Rambam. Hu hatzivui asher tzuvenu b'hamanat elokut v'hu shenamin sheyesh sham ilah v'siba. Right. We didn't get to it yet, right? Who poel l'kol ha'nimtza'ot.
Oh,
Yeah. והוא אומרו אנוכי השם אלוקיך, ובסוף גמרא במכות אמרו תרי"ג מצוות נאמרו למשה בסיני, ויקרא תורה ציווה לנו משה, רצוני לומר מניין תורה. But Minyan Torah is not 613, Minyan Torah is 611. So what about the other two mitzvot? Because we know they're Taryag mitzvot. Anochi v'lo yeh lecha mipi hagvura shama'un. Okay, so the Rambam says you have 611 mitzvot that Am Yisrael heard from Moshe Rabbeinu, and then you have two mitzvot, Anochi v'lo yeh lecha, which they heard from Hashem. It seems very clear that that's, according to the Rambam, that that's what this Gemara is talking about. V'hinei nitbe'er sha'anochi Hashem Elokecha miklal taryag mitzvot. Here you see that Anochi, the commandment to know Hashem, is one of the mitzvot. The second mitzvot that the Rambam has, V'hi hatzivui be'emunah, again he has itikad, hayichud. והוא שנאמין שפועל המציאות, that קדוש ברוך הוא, פועל המציאות, הוא אחד. והוא אומרו שמע ישראל השם אלוקינו השם אחד. And then he has the first מצוות לא תעשה, הוא שהזהירנו בהאמין באל אחר זולתו, there's a love מצוות לא תעשה, that you're not allowed to have a belief in a God outside of Hashem. V'hu omro lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. And the Rambam comes in the Mishneh Torah to write this down. He does it as follows. And here, as Rav Kafach points out, the Rambam himself is saying how we should understand itikad in Arabic. And he writes, Yesod ha-yesodot va'amud ha-chochmot. So we have here, of course, Yud Hey Vav Hey, he begins with the Shem HaMeforash. Leida sheyesh sham matzui rishon. That's Hashem. Hashem is the matzui rishon. V'hu mamtzi kol nimtza. V'yediat devar zeh mitzvat aseh. Shene'emar anochi Hashem Elokecha. V'chol ha'ma'aleh al da'ato sheyesh sham Eloah acher. עובר בלא תעשה שנאמר לא יהיה לך אלוהים אחרים על פניי אלוה הזה אחד הוא וידיעת דבר זה מצוות עשה שנאמר Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So he has these three mitzvot which are connected with knowing, with yediyah. And in Sefer HaMitzvot, he presumably means exactly the same thing, but he uses the Arabic word itikad. Now, Rav Hasdai Crescas has the Hebrew translation of Moshe ibn Tibon, the grandson of Yehuda ibn Tibon, the son of Shmuel ibn Tibon. You know, the Ibn Tibon family, the grandfather, the son, and the grandson, and the nephews all were translators. They're all translators.
Talking about the translation of the Moreh Nevuchim.
Shmuel ibn Tibon did Moreh Nevuchim, right? But Moshe ibn Tibon did Sefer HaMitzvot. Right. So the translation we have here of Hamanat is from Moshe ibn Tibon. Rav Hasdai Crescas writes as follows.
What do you mean? If they would have the translation from Kapach, he wouldn't ask these questions? Why?
Exactly.
Why?
Because he would have had Leida, Yediyah.
So why is Yediyah better?
Because you could research.
You can't command someone to know.
Research and know.
That's what teachers do all the time to students. Go home, do your homework, and and you can command someone to know, to study, and to do your best to try to understand. Understand something. You could command someone to know, but you can't command someone to believe.
Right. Even the second argument that you mentioned could also be refuted by that. Like even if it's a psychological, you mentioned that
The psychological. Right?
you mentioned three. You only mentioned two so far. But
And notice the psychological argument holds for all beliefs. The logical argument only holds for the belief of Anochi Hashem.
Psychological argument is the same thing about the Sachmoid.
Holds for every.
On the Sachmoid. How could you be a man on the Sachmoid? The same.
No, but you're talking about the wall. You mean that the first argument doesn't work?
The logical argument, namely, which we'll see in a second, is that only holds for the belief in Hashem. Because the belief in Hashem, he says, is the yesod.
But he was asking if the second argument,
the psychological argument.
He's asking if by the version that we have in Rambam Yedi'ah, does it solve also the second argument?
Because what if I'm not convinced? I'm not.
You have some.
Can you still have a like if it's a psychological, then I'm crazy. What could you do? I don't.
Okay, so here, Rav Ḥasdai Crescas discusses this in the chapters on Bechira, which we're not going to talk about, but I discuss it in the book and in the Merkaz Shazar book. What does he say? He says, well, what about all the emunot that he's writing about himself? Now you have the emunah emunah in Hashem, emunah in the Achdut, and you have all kinds of emunah in Hashgacha. You have all kinds of emunot. He says, what about all these emunot? If you can't command them, what status do they have? And we know in the Gemara that you have a sachar for these emunot, and you have an onish if you don't hold these emunot. So how could that possibly be? And there he says the sachar and the onish is on the ratzon lahamin. It's not on the emunah itself. It's on the ratzon. It's on the desire to believe. So he doesn't really actually say this, but it turns out that if you think about what he says, and there was what schar are you getting? Schar you're getting for the mitzvah of trying to understand. Right. But if you suppose you have two different people. Suppose you have one person who is an atheist who is really very, very anguished. He's trying all the time. He spends the whole day learning Gemara in order to get his emunah, and he's unable to do it. But as opposed to someone else who may be a ma'amin, but is not doing any effort, and maybe be a ma'amin and says, "Oh, it's really terrible. It's such a difficult thing to be a yid. It's I'm a ma'amin, but I don't like it. So actually, the atheist who is trying very hard to know Hashem and is dedicating himself completely to try to know Hashem is in a better position than the ma'amin who says, efshi, I wish I could eat that ham sandwich, but I have this emunah which is bothering me.
The Rambam would hold the other way. The Rambam would hold the other way.
That you're supposed to say efshi, the Rambam says, yeah. Right.
Because I came on a ticket.
Right, no, because everyone does, right, everyone knows what the Rambam says in Shmona Prakim, where he says that with regard to the ceremonial mitzvot or the non-moral mitzvot, you're supposed to say efshi. You're supposed to, you're supposed to, when you walk by the non-kosher, you're not supposed to say, it's disgusting, right? But you're supposed to say efshi. I wish I could eat it, but it's not, it's not kosher. I used to give my students the example, in Israel they have the kosher McDonald's and the not kosher McDonald's, and they're both the same, but one has a hechsher and the other doesn't have a hechsher. And it's the same meat, they get it from the same place, and the same potatoes, everything. But so it's not that when you're supposed to walk by the unkosher McDonald's, you're supposed to say, "Oh, it's terrible, I don't want to." And when you walk by the kosher McDonald's, you say, "Oh, it's great, I'm going to have it." But you're supposed to say, "Well, efshi, I'd like to eat it, but they don't have a hechsher." Okay, so but of course the Rambam says for moral mitzvot it doesn't work. You're not supposed to say I'd like to murder efshi, but or I'd like to steal, but the Torah says I'm not allowed to do it. You're supposed to train yourself to be a moral person, you shouldn't want to steal, you shouldn't want to murder. So there, you should do the mitzvot completely out of will. Okay. Anyway, Rav Hasdai Crescas, Beit Yaakov lechu v'nelcha b'or Hashem. Right, it's an important pasuk for him. He names his book after that. That's how he begins this discussion. Yesod ha'emunot. Here he's just like the Rambam. He begins with the Shem HaMeforash. Yesod ha'emunot v'shoresh ha'hatchalot. So here he's talking about emunot. So he clearly, he has a status. When he says emunot aren't mitzvot, he's not saying that emunot aren't important. He's saying they're very important, but they're not mitzvot. Asher yashiru el yedi'at ha'emet b'pinot ha'torah ha'elohit hu ha'emunah b'metziyut ha'el yitaleh. Okay, so the first thing is the first shoresh of all the shorashim, the yesod ha'emunot, the shoresh ha'hatchalot, the basis of everything is the emunah b'Hashem. It's a yesod, it's not a mitzvah, it's a yesod. Or, as the philosophers say in Greek, it's the arche, right? The hatchalah, the beginning of all things. Uliyot ha'kavanah b'chelek hazeh, namely, we know that he wanted to write two parts, chelek of hashkafot, the philosophical part, and the halachic part, and of his work, and the topic of the philosophical part is imut pinot deot Torah elokit, to verify and establish the beliefs of the divine Torah. So we have to examine this root and how we know it. V'ulam heyot shoresh hatchalot haTorah ha'elokit hi ha'emunah b'metziyut ha'el yitaleh hu mivuar b'atzmo. It's self-evident that the whole basis of everything is emunah b'Hashem. Liyot haTorah misuderet umitzuveh mimisader umitzaveh. If you say the Torah is elokit, the Torah is divine, you mean that it was given by a divine commander. That's what you mean when you say the Torah is divine. Ve'ein inyan liyota elokit zulat heyot hamisader v'hamitzaveh ha'eloah yitaleh. If you're saying that you have a Torah elokit, that means that you're saying that it was commanded by Elokim. That's what you mean by it. You can't say I have a Torah elokit and I'm an atheist. If you hold that you have a Torah elokit, then you're saying that it was commanded by Hashem. Right? We have in the Ramban talks about the mitzvah rishon of the Rambam is tu'ut mitparsem. Maybe in different chilufei nusach he says tu'ut mifursam there. Because Hasdai Crescas is simply following the Ramban. That to count the emunot.
Does he bring Rambans in his ksava?
He's clearly referring to it. He clearly has a Ramban in mind. He was the Ramban.
He brings in Or Hashem Nachmanides. He brings them a lot of times. Does he bring the Ramban?
The Ramban, he cites them a couple of times. Yeah. Look, he's in the Ramban. Is he's one of we said the founder of the Catalonian Beit Midrash. So the Tamida. Right. So you have the Ramban. And certainly the Ran, they're always following the the Ritva, of course. The Ritva has, which Yair Lorbermeyer has recently. I don't know if he published it yet. Did he? He wrote an article on the Ritva. Right. On the Ritva. The Ritva, of course, is a student of the Rashba, student of that whole Mesoret of the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva, the Ran, Rav Hasdai Crescas. In the Sefer Zikaron of the Ritva, although Yaralovim is going to have a slightly variation on this, he defends the Rambam against the Ramban. And he basically says, I personally follow the Ramban, not the Rambam. But what can I do? The Ramban didn't understand the Rambam's philosophy, so I have to defend the Rambam, even though I basically agree with the Ramban, which is a very interesting thing that you don't always find, where someone will say, I agree with the Ramban against the Rambam, but I'm going to defend the Rambam against the Ramban, even though the Ramban is basically right, he's got some points wrong. And I want to show that.
Misunderstood.
What?
He misunderstood the
Misunderstood, he didn't.
The arguments show that he misunderstood.
No. Even after he's answering, he's still saying that the Machlok is a Rambam.
Not true,
He
and
said,
he follows-
This translation says that Mishimuna means whatever
going there,
is.
Kabbalah.
It doesn't go on like that.
Excuse me, what does it say?
They interpret Mishimuna as
What is that edition?
Raslin Wise.
Oh, I don't know why. Oh, it's the new edition. I haven't seen
Yeah.
it right. What did it say?
Anyone who included belief in the existence of God among the positive commandments. Mishimuna means anyone who will. Not like someone like the Rambam. It doesn't reference anyone. It's like a general term.
Right, but clearly the general
Same
term that
language.
we're talking about is the Rambam.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I mean, no, Hasdai Crescas
It could
is being
reference that guy who munad.
Right.
Yeah, that munad.
Hasdai Crescas is being very polite. He doesn't like to say the Rambam made a tu'ut mifursam. So somebody made a tu'ut mifursam.
That's he's not saying somebody, said anyone who.
Right.
Very
That's
different.
I don't think it's saying anyone who is saying somebody made a tu'ut mifursam.
Okay.
I mean, what do you think? What's the
It's
lashon?
Mishimuna.
Jeez, I don't think that's translation. It's more. I think it's more precise to say.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, you know, everybody.
But if you said already, could you give you 2 cents? What do you think about the translation from Shlomo Fisher? What do you think about not translation, but his? I see you quoting from his Hashem. Could you tell us what you think about this
It's addition.
his edition?
All Hashem is written in Lashon Kodesh.
I know. I'm just,
Right. No, but he has an addition.
Critical edition.
We'll talk about that when we talk about Soda Ibur, because there we'll see a case where he made the right decision as opposed to others.
okay.
No, he was a great Talmid Chacham, a very important Rav in Yerushalayim, and we'll discuss exactly. We'll discuss it in the fourth. Right, I think the fourth meeting. On the whole, it's a good addition, but there's some places where he skips some words or he gets some things. He doesn't have the right reading, but on the whole, it's a good reading. Okay.
What was my first thing?
Right. ואולם היות שורש ההתחלות, התורה האלוקית, etc. וזה, אוקיי. ולזה טעה טעות מפורסם, מי שמנע מצוות עשה להאמין. It's clear that he's not saying anyone who happens to have made this, he's saying the person who counted it as a mitzvah. He doesn't like to attack the Rambam if he does it. Indirectly, the person, everybody knows who it is. Everybody knows that it's the Rambam who did it. But he says, Misha Mana, right? Misha Mana, and you're going to mitzvah taseh lahamin b'tziyut ha'el yitaleh. V'zeh ki hamitzvah min hamitztaref. Right? The word mitzvah is in the logic of relations. It's hitztarfut, the logic of relations. There are some words which have to be understood as relations. For example, the word father. If someone is a father, one is a father only with regard to children. So you're not a father in general. You're a father in regard to children. Or if you're a child in a son or a daughter. You're a son or a daughter in regard to your parents. You're not so one can say you're the father of the father of Moshe, but so with regard to Moshe, you're a father. But with regard to Shlomo, you're not a father. So there are some words which you can't substitute. So one could say, for example, this is a green can, and it's also a green object. So I can say, give me a green object, or give me a green can, or give me a can. It's the same thing. But if someone is a father, you're only a father. You can't substitute it all the time. The famous example in the history of philosophy is Plato in his dialogue, the Euthydemus, where you have this fellow Dionysiodorus who is having a discussion with Ctesippus, and he says to him, is that your dog? And he says, yes, that's my dog. And he says, and those little puppies, are they your puppies? And he says, yes, they are. And is that dog the father of the puppies? Yes. So your dog, it's your dog, and your dog is the father of the puppies. Yes, so it's your dog, and the dog is a father. Yes. So therefore, the dog is your father. Well, why doesn't it work? Because father only works with regard to the children of that father. So if you're saying you're wearing a blue coat, then you're wearing a blue coat no matter what you're doing. Is that your blue coat? Yes. Is that your object? Etc. Anyway, mitzvah. Rav Hasdai Crescas says you can't say mitzvah unless you have a mitzaveh. The word mitzvah carries within it a mitzaveh. I can't say I have a mitzvah unless I have in mind a mitzaveh. And the mitzvah always refers to a mitzaveh. And therefore he says you can't have a mitzvah elokit unless you have a mitzaveh eloki. And thus he says that. So logically speaking, if I say I have a divine commandment, I must believe in a divine commander. Otherwise, the words don't make sense.
This argument is the third argument. Mitzvah.
This is the first argument. This is a version
part of the logical argument.
Right, part of the logical argument.
So really, it's the logical, also philological argument. Also,
It's a linguistic argument.
linguistic argument.
Right.
Because you said it's three arguments. Now we really have four.
No.
Well,
Linguistic.
they're all supporting the idea that before you can have a mitzvah to believe, you have to believe in a mitzvah. And they're all variations of the same idea that you can't have a mitzvah to believe in Hashem unless you first have a belief in Hashem giving you that mitzvah. And once you have, and so then he's going to say it's like a hall of mirrors. Okay, so
Get the view.
yeah, each one goes back. Okay. V'zeki ha-mitzvah min ha-mitztaref. It's a relational term. V'lo titzuyar mitzvah bezulat mitzaveh yadua. You can't have a mitzvah without a mitzaveh. V'lezeh ka'asher naniach emunat mitziyut ha'el mitzvah. Kvar naniach emunat mitziyut ha'el kodemet biyedi'ah le'emunat mitziyut ha'el. So whenever you have a mitzvah, you always have to have a previous emunah in Hashem before that mitzvah. Ve'im naniach gam kein emunat mitziyut ha'el hakodemet mitzvah, that there's another one, then that one too, you're going to have to keep on going back and saying that you have a previous emunah. You always have to have a previous emunah and a commander before the command. Titchayev gam kein emunat mitziyut ha'el kodemet, v'chein lebilti tachlit. You'd have an infinite amount of commandments to believe, because whenever you have a commandment to believe, you have to say, oh, but previously I knew, previously I had a belief. And then he said, so you keep on going back for like a hall of mirrors into an infinity. See that Rav Hasdai Crescas always likes to bring in infinity. V'kol ze betachlit habitul, that doesn't make sense. V'lezeh haya mevuar she'ein ro'ui libnot emunat mitziyut ha'el b'mitzvot aseh. So he's saying, there we see that there's no, we shouldn't count it as a mitzvah. And then he says, ukvar yera'eh mipanim, and there are reasons for this, and he says, v'zeh shekvar yera'eh mihora'at shem ha-mitzvah, v'gidra, from the definition of the term mitzvah, shelo tipol ela b'dvarim sheyesh l'ratzon u'l'bechira mavo b'hem. Here's the psychological explanation. That you can't have, Asher, you wanted to say something about that? No. About, you can't have a psychological, you can't have a mitzvah without ratzon u'bechira. You can't have a mitzvah without ratzon u'bechira. So, you can only command someone to do something that the person has the will and the ability and the choice to do. So,
Why doesn't he have the choice?
Because you don't have a choice on emunot. That's his argument.
You can't decide to believe this is green.
You could research and...
That's not
you
the...
deciding. You could decide to research.
Does he believe in Bechira and anything else?
He's saying on all. Look, but he has a whole discussion of Bechira, and Bechira too, as far as he's concerned, has sibot. But still, there's a difference between something one does, Bechira and Ratzon, and something that you don't. And you can't command somebody, it's unfair, let's say, to command someone to believe that the wall is red. You can only command someone to do something that a person can do. You can't command someone to lift up this building.
But if you believe it's true...
Let's finish the piece, and then we'll make around. Let's finish the piece, okay? Let's finish the piece.
I must tell you that I once talked about Prof. Hasdai Crescas in a conference in Japan. And in Japan, everybody drinks green tea. So I didn't have a Canada Dry. I had a little green tea. So I gave the example. I may wish that this green tea were apple juice, but what can I do? It's green tea. No matter how hard I try, I can't change my belief. This is green tea, and I can't turn it into anything else. In the intermission, in the break, one of the young graduate student came up to me and said, everyone is really insulted. It's like the national drink. You sort of you insulted the
apple juice,
and they all brought me some apple juice, and so after the break, the first thing I said was, I like green tea, but. The thing is, this is the psychological point that Rav Hasdai Crescas makes about all beliefs, that all beliefs are forced on you by what you know. He makes the same belief with regard to, it's not only what you know rationally, it's what you know if you see a miracle. If you witness a miracle at Kriyat Yam Suf, you don't have the ability to deny it.
Can I tell somebody, you have to believe in Einstein's theory of general real... You could force him, you could say you have to learn it, and you'll believe it, it's the truth.
But you hear the argument, they keep sneaking it in. We heard you, thank you. It's the same argument, we heard it.
Yoel, what do you want? The fact is,
that's
how science progresses. Science exactly progresses this way. That there's they could have said to Einstein, look, this is Newton's physics, you have to accept it. And Einstein said, wait a minute, maybe there are exceptions.
Yeah, but Mati, to answer your question, the Rambam does not say you commanded to go research. He said he commanded to believe. So stop trying to...
No, you're right. He said, but his version, Tiban's version, the Rambam is
right, but
but interesting also that even though the Rambam is before the Crescas and asked already this, he's already arguing with the Rambam, but I don't know why Crescas, I think, is the only one that when he puts the question to the Rambam, he's very busy. I think he's the only one. maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is very busy with the term mitzvah. What mitzvah means. I think it's only Rishon. They're busy. What the definition of mitzvah? Like it very linguistically, what mitzvah means. What does it mean, mitzvah?
Right. That's
and,
good.
and this is how he analyzes this question. And there's no Rishon that asks this way the question.
That's a very good point, right? That he is focusing on what a mitzvah means. With regard to the emunah, you have in the Kinat Sofrim of one of the Perushim on Sefer HaMitzvot by Rav Hanania Katzis, he brings down the Ramban and Rav Hasdai Crescas against the Rambam, and he says, well, when the Rambam says Yesod HaYesodot, he's referring to emunah, and when he says Amud HaChochmot, he's referring to Yediyah. So he tries to he realizes that Rambam is really talking about Yediyah, but he tries to preserve also the emunah by saying Yesod Yesodot is
Yesod means the emunah from
he splits the Yesod Yesodot is emunah, Amud HaChochmot the Yediyah. So he says Rambam saying both the emunah. So he's trying to he realizes that there's a problem with the translation. But right,
Who says that?
Kinat Sofrim.
The Kinat Sofrim in Hanania Katzis. I think it was in Italy in the 16th century. So he wants to preserve the idea of emunah, even though he's recognizing the problem raised by Hasdai Crescas. So the emunah has to be. You have to have some. Emunah has to concern. Ve'ech sheyeh l'mashu hu מבואר היות האמונה הזאת שורש וההתחלה, it's the beginning, the basis of everything, לכלל המצוות, אם נמנה אותה במצווה, יחויב שתהיה התחלה לעצמה. It'll be a root of itself, it'll be the principle of itself, and that, והוא בתכלית הביטול. Right, can't be.
So I want to open up for questions. If anyone want to ask a question now, yeah.
It's not green.
I did make it green.
That's red
Right.
and
I
green.
did make it green.
No, you gotta make only green.
Okay,
Okay,
keep
it's
that.
red for you and green
If
for everyone
anyone that
else.
wants to ask a question now,
So now we're moving on to the halakha.
yes, I'm saying that's what I'm saying. Anyone want to ask a question now? I'm shy, yeah.
I would just, maybe I misread.
A bit lacher.
I read the last argument from Crescas a little different. When he says that it seems that in order for something to be a mitzvah, it has to be b'chira. It seems that he says that you have to have a choice. You have to have a choice that can't be intellectually forced on you, because
Right, absolutely, right.
It's not a
it's as if like you have to know. You have to have like two ways to look at it or something.
Right.
Right. Once you understand it, you don't have b'chira. That's what he's saying.
Right.
It's not the first argument, because it kept on like going back and forth. It's you can't force somebody to believe. No, that even if you could force somebody to believe, there's a separate argument that you must have choice. You must have a choice to be able to do. And once you know something to be true, for whatever reason, you don't have that choice, and therefore it can't be a mitzvah. I just want to emphasize that.
Right. So, for example, it doesn't make sense for me to command you to believe that 1 and 1 is 2.
Once I know that 1 and 1 and 2.
Once you know that 1 and 1 is 2, right? The command has to be on to make sense out of the word command. It has to be something that you have a choice, and it could be something that you know definitely, you know it so clearly that it doesn't even make sense to. It doesn't add anything to. I mean, what would it mean to command you to? It would be completely superfluous.
And just that, I don't know what he does with the pusik.
You wouldn't be able to refuse the command. It would be a command. It would be a command that you wouldn't be able to refuse. Would that be considered a command?
So question, I don't know what he does. What does he do with the pusik of Bechad to Bechaim? All these people choose life. Is there anybody that has a question of truth? Could you choose life or death? Is there anybody that doesn't choose life? What does he do that? Do people have a choice choosing life or death?
It's a way of talking.
Isn't it a way of
Bruchu
convincing
Klulu.
you that the Torah is the
Klulu,
life?
exactly.
Who
Does he-
says
I'm
it?
It's a
just asking
continuation.
What he does with that there's a choice? Is the Bechira
Is
It's never determinist.
You practice the question.
It's a optional.
There's a shach theory of low picture the Crescas from device.
Is that a mitzvah? Uvacharta
I
b'chai.
wonder how Crescas uses it. Does he say it's a mitzvah? At least does he say
There's
it's
no
chira?
Rishon that says there's a mitzvah there, by the way. There's only a Charadim that says there's a mitzvah.
No, but is it chira? It says chira.
What
No, I'm saying that if
What-
Crescas
part of the
says that
Critic.
chira,
It's
then
part
you
of the
have
Critic,
to-
yeah.
This is the mitzvah.
The choice has to be.
Sabruch
literally-
v'sakulu.
But you actually have to choose if we all. In those times they thought that people want life.
Yeah.
There is no choice. How do you use the word choice for it? That's what I'm.
Right. No, that's.
Chai bohem below shiumas ben.
You want to ask? You want to ask something? No, I
So
thought.
I'm asking that.
No, it's a good question. Good. Okay.
Fine.
What's behind all this? Meaning, it's a nice discussion, and there are logical questions about Emunah being part of the number of mitzvahs, but there's something behind it. What's really bothering him? Like, what did he think the Rambam wants to do by including Emunah as part of the 613?
Yeah, I think it's part of what he dislikes about it, besides the technical things he's raising, is the intellectualization of the mitzvot. In other words, he has this idea that the mitzvot are mitzvot ma'asiyot, that the things to do, and the Rambam also brings this in while he's bringing in all kinds of philosophical ideas. I think Rav Hasdai Crescas thinks that the Rambam's definitions, we see it of course we see it very clearly in Perek Chelik when he discusses the Ikarim, the Sodot, that he's bringing in philosophical terms, and it's also it's clear in Sefer HaMitzvot, and it's very very clear in Hilchot Yesodei Torah that in the first 4 prakim of Hilchot Yesodei Torah he gives you a summary of all of physics and metaphysics, right there. So I think he feels that the idea of the Rambam's interpretation of Anochi and Lo Yelecha is part of his Aristotelization of the Torah. That's I think that's behind. He doesn't. If you want to know what seems to be behind it, that's what seems to be behind it, and what he why do you think there's something?
No, he's saying it doesn't make sense that it's not just a question the minyan and mitzvahs.
It's not really a
Maybe it is, but I'm
how
saying
you're going to reach
that's
the
what's so
613.
important. The 630 mitzvahs.
Well, maybe
the minyan, yeah.
It's the Ma'amad of the Jew before he's being Mekayim a mitzvah. What position does he have to be in? And I think there's a big difference how the Rambam sees this Jew and how Ḥasdai Crescas. I'm
That's
just
what he's asking. This is what
yeah,
he's
yeah. I'm elaborating on what he's saying.
Is it possible that
There's
he
gotta
thinks that
be
if you're putting a mun as part of the things that you are able to do or not do, then it's not real. It's that as if it's not supposed to be true, and you're just doing it, maybe a mun achraychi or something. I don't know. If it's something that you can choose to do, then it's not about the truth. It's not about reality. And that's what's bothering you.
That's a good point. That once you say that it's a mitzvah, if it's a mitzvah, then it has to be something that you can do or not do. That's open.
By his
So
understanding
that's a
of
description.
mitzvah.
It's
Rambam
rather
disagrees with his
it's
understanding.
it's a simon to the type of emunah the Rambam expects from you, rather than as being the sibur.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And, to the, one more question we're going to...
I think, well, here, I'm looking at the Rambam looks at it that there's something that you should do. You should try to
Give some up.
work on this. And not only they have a choice what to do. It must be that the Ḥasdai Crescas learned the Rambam it's like Laida. To know that he should work on this.
Right.
Lahamin means it's an active thing. Let's say according to the Rambam says that you should research, you should be the way to be ma'amin is by researching this and to be to think about it. What is before? If we don't before reaching the conclusion, we're still in the middle of reaching the conclusion. Are we done? Are we then amamin or not amamin? According to the Rambam, what is if we're not? We're still in the beginning. We're starting to learn the word in the Ruchim. We're still second chapter. Are we then amamin? Not amamin.
This is a good question. Who the Rambam really considers to have fulfilled those mitzvot, the mitzvot of. Look, the Rambam mentions the Rambam in Hilchot Yesodei Torah mentions 5 mitzvot. Leida, right? The mitzvah Anochi Hashem, Lo Yeh Lech Elohim Acharim Al Panai, Hashem Echad, Ahava and Yirah. And they're all based on the study of the universe. Right? They're all based on knowledge. They're all part of Yediyah.
This alone is something that.
When, how much do you have to know? Now, he also calls these 2 chapters the Pardes. These 4 chapters, the Pardes. And he also calls these 4 chapters Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. Now, you would normally think that Maaseh Merkavah and Maaseh Bereshit, these are things that only really great scholars should know. And you would think that this is Rambam's attitude. Rambam's attitude in Moreh Nevuchim is that these are big sodot and not for everybody. But in Mishneh Torah, he commands everybody. This is an amazing thing about Mishneh Torah that usually isn't recognized, that Mishneh Torah, he's commanding everybody to be a Talmid Chacham. He's commanding everybody to have this tremendous knowledge. So what happens if someone doesn't? But he's saying, he's taking Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah in Pardes, which are these the most esoteric, and he's saying everyone is commanded with these 5 mitzvot. He doesn't say these 5 mitzvot are just for the Talmidei Chachamim. He says everybody is commanded with them. So Rav Tzadok is saying, well, what do you mean everybody? When do you get to the category? Then you could say that I fulfilled these mitzvot. Because it's Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. That's very, very difficult. And all these, that's the 4th thing, the 4 chapters that the Rambam has is really, you have to study the whole universe, know everything. From the Tabur Haaretz to the Chayot HaKodesh. So, this is a big question, but it's definitely true and sort of surprising that the Rambam is commanding everybody to fulfill these mitzvot.
So he wants to
women also, by the way, he also doesn't exempt
this
women.
This is exactly what Crescas tries to say, that you don't have to do. You can believe without being choker.
Right.
You can be a mom without being choker. That's the essence of what's going on over here.
Right.
But if we say that you have to have a mitzvah, then you have to be choker. And then you have to do more and more and more to be choker.
Right.
And he said, you can believe even without choker. If you need choker, you can also do something. This
doesn't say that.
Well, with regard to
doesn't say that you can be choker. He says you can't be mitzvah unbelieving. Could be that you only believe if after you can be choker. It's not just what's not what it's
He's
saying.
a little ambiguous about this because he does say it with regard to Harugei Lut.
Right. Okay.
But it's true that he's a little.
Say that.
Okay. Now we move on to the halachic argument. Why did they come? What was the halachic? What was the Talmudic texts that led them to this view? Limnot HaShoresh Hazeh Mitzvah. Ma'amar B'sof Gemara Makot, which you already said. This is Rambam. Rambam quotes it in Sefer HaMitzvot very clearly. Omram Taryag Mitzvot Ne'emru LaMoshe Misinai. Right, that's the same Gemara. Ma'ikra Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah in Gematria is 611. So what about the other two? Veheshivu anochi v'lo yeh lecha mipi hagvura shema'un. Okay, so that's what led everybody to this mistake, what led the Rambam to this mistake. The Rambam himself quotes this Gemara in Sefer HaMitzvot. V'chashvu mipnei zeh she'anochi v'lo yeh lecha mipi shtei mitzvot. Because of the wrong reading of this Gemara, they thought that Anochi and Lo Yeh Lecha were two mitzvot. V'lezeh manu emunat mitziyut ha'el mitzvah, v'hu mivuar shelo yitchayev zeh. It's clear that this is a wrong reading of the Gemara. Lefi shemichuvan sham shehashem hanikra ken, Anochi Hashem in the Pshat is not a mitzvah, it's a description. Shehashem hanikra kein hu ha'eloah hamanhig asher hotzianu mi'eretz Mitzrayim. That pasuk is telling us that Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, Shem Meforash, first existent, is the God who took us out of Egypt. That's what's coming to make that statement. That the first God of the universe, the God of the universe, is the power who took us out of Egypt. The Aseret Dibrot begins with a statement that you came out of Egypt not by accident, not by Moshe Rabbeinu. You came out of Egypt by a power, which is the power that created the universe, which is the Yud Hey Vav Hey. Yud Hey Vav Hey is Elokim. And it's not telling you this is a command. It's not a commandment. It's just a description. That's the fact. The fact is, who took you out of Egypt? The first cause of the universe acted to take you out of the universe. Is money. Okay.
So when the Gemara says Enoch, it's just a reference to the full pusik.
Right, now he's going to come. Right, but now he's going to come. Right.
And the pusik of Enoch that finishes with...
Right, that he's going to explain it in the next text. That's exactly what he's going to say.
Basically, the Crescas, Anochi v'Leichu is the Koteret. It's not
Right.
Reference.
Exactly.
Not reference, even more. It's a
Koteret.
It's a Koteret.
It's a quotation.
Right. But now he's going to do something very clever, and this is very typical of his Rav Hasdai Crescas' style. V'lezeh heitiv harav Rabbeinu Moshe, the Rambam. Now when he's criticizing the Rambam, he doesn't mention him by name. But here, he's giving him a compliment. Yeah, Mishabeach. And at the same time as he's criticizing him, he's saying, too bad he got it all wrong, but even though he got it wrong, he has a good point here. V'lezeh heitiv harav Rabbeinu Moshe, Rambam, lefi haderech hazeh. According to his derech, which is wrong, he got something right. B'sefer ha-mitzvot shelo, shemana ha-mitzvah harishona b'ha-manat ha-elohut. So he did something right, the Rambam. Even though he has a wrong derech, he did something good on his wrong derech. V'hu shenamin sheyesh sham ilah v'siba, Hashem, v'hu ha-poel l'chol ha-nimtza'im, Elokim. He got the meaning of the pasuk right when he said that Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, means that the first existent, the first power in the universe was the power that took us out of Egypt. He got that right. V'hu omro Anochi Hashem Elokecha, hine peresh sham ha'elokut, Heyoto poel l'chol hanimtzaot. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. What's Elokecha? Elokecha is poel l'chol hanimtzaot. And we know that the Rambam in Hilchot Yesodei Torah, it means that it's manhig hagalgal. Right? Elokim is the manhig hagalgal. And something very interesting, when the Rambam cites Anochi and Lo Yeh Lecha, he cites it many times, right? In Parak Chelek, he cites it in Sefer HaMitzvot. Right, he cites it, Moreh Nevuchim. What does he leave out when he cites Anochi Hashem Elokecha? Eretz Mitzrayim. He
so
never mentions Eretz Mitzrayim. He always quotes Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's it. That's it. Right. And so what does Hasdai Crescas say? According to his Rambam's derech, he's got the wrong derech, but he has a good point about Yetziat Mitzrayim. You know, v'yeh lefi zeh omro asher hotzayticha me'eretz Mitzrayim kidmut ra'aya al zot ha'emunah. The Rambam has a good pshat in the pasuk. Even though he thinks he made a mistake, he thinks it's a mitzvah and he has to change it. But he's right that what he's saying, Enochi Hashem, acts, I Hashem, namely, what's the pasuk saying? The pasuk is saying is that the great God of the universe also acts in the world.
How do you see it?
How do you see it? The Rambam says you see it, Galgal Sovev Tamid. Rav Hasdai Crescas says, well, look at the pasuk. Rambam is obviously means that Yetziat Mitzrayim is the proof that Hashem is poel.
The Torah and the Shabbos. The Torah and the Rambam say that the Yetziat Mitzrayim is the raya on the existing, on the Eibishter has Hashgacha, and it takes care.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the pshat. That's the pshat. The pshat is, but Hasdai Crescas is forcing the Rambam to do the pshat. He's saying, the Rambam says, he uses the same expression, manhig. What is the manhig? The manhig, which we'll talk about next time, the manhig comes from the Midrash about Bira Doleket. But here, I mean, it's the irony is so great that he's saying the Rambam, okay, he got it wrong, he thought it was a mitzvah, but at least he understands the meaning of the pasuk, that it's about Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Rambam understands that the whole idea of Anochi Hashem is to tell us that Yetziat Mitzrayim was done by Hashem. And now when you think about it, the Rambam never says Yetziat Mitzrayim, but that is the pshat of what he's saying. The psuk doesn't really say anything about Manhig Galgal. The proof of the pasuk is Asher Oseticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Mibeit Avadim. So he's saying, look, what the Rambam's got it right. He thought it was a mitzvah. He's wrong about that, but he's got it right. That Hashem is Elokecha means that Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the one God of the universe, is the God who took us out of Egypt. The same God who took us out of Egypt. How do we know that Hashem, everything is chomer b'yad hayotzer? It's not because of a galgal sovev tamid. It's because of Yetziat Mitzrayim. We see the action of a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the world. V'lezeh kvar tipol zot hamitzvah. According to the mistaken view that it's a mitzvah, but the mitzvah that the Rambam is talking about is al ha'emunah shehu asher hotziyanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, which is exactly what the Rambam doesn't say, right? That's Yehuda Halevi makes the big point that the basis of the pasuk is Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the Yahadut is based on Yetziat Mitzrayim, and Kadosh Baruch Hu, the God of history.
The professor refers to the Ebenezer brings from be alive.
Oh yeah. Right, so you have, of course, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says it in the Kuzari when the king, right? The king says to him, the king of the Kuzari says to him, "Who's your God?" And he says, God is the God who took us out of Egypt. And the king says, "Why don't you say that your God is the God of the creative universe?" He says, "That's what the philosophers say. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Our God, that our religion is based on, is the God who acts in history." And then we have this as Rav Yonasan mentions, we have this recorded by Rav Avram Ibn Ezra in his Perush, and he of course knew Rabbi Yehuda Halevi personally, and apparently was related to Yehuda Halevi, that the son of Ibn Ezra married the daughter of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, or something like that, and there are several places in his Perush where Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra quotes Yehuda Halevi not from the Kuzari, but he quotes from him from conversations that they had Baal Peh. And one of those conversations is that has to do with Anochi Hashem and Asher Oseticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Mibeit Avadim. And he says Yehuda Halevi once asked him, why the Torah says if you philosophers are right, I mean Ibn Ezra was a philosopher, if you philosophers are right, then it would be just similar as sufficient to say Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And Ibn Ezra answers him, if the Torah were written only for Chachamim, it would have said just Anochi Hashem Elokecha. But since the Torah is written for Chachamim and everybody else, it says look it up in your Ibn Ezra Mikrot Gedolot. That's exactly what he says. But of course, this conversation we don't have. We have the conversation as it was preserved by Rav Avram Ibn Ezra. We don't have what Yehuda Levi would have written had he preserved it. So here, Avram Ibn Ezra gives himself the last word. You don't know how Yehuda Levi came back. Okay. Now we move into the argument.
How he explains it?
How Yahweh explains it. Okay. וזה שאומרם אנוכי ולא יהיה לך, כבר ייראה שהוא כולל כל הדיבור הנמשך עד לאוהבי ולשומרי מצוותיי. Right? When it says אנוכי ולא יהיה לך, it doesn't mean the first two psukim. It means all the psukim, the first 10 psukim basically. וזה שאומרם אנוכי ולא יהיה לך, because what is unusual about the first 10 psukim? It's 10, I think, yeah. What's unusual about it? It's what? Right, exactly. It's in first person. Hashem is speaking in the first person. לפי שכבר השתתפו, כבר ייראה שהוא כולל כל הדיבור הנמשך עד לאוהבי ולשומרי מצוותיי. לפי שכבר השתתפו אלו השני דיבורים בדקדוק לשון מדבר בעדו, namely first person. באומרו אנוכי, Hashem speaks in the first person and says אנוכי אשר הוצאתיך, Hashem continues to speak in the first person. Al panai continues to speak in the first person. Ki anochi Hashem Elokecha le'ohavai u'leshomrei mitzvotai. It's all he's speaking. Hashem is speaking in the first person, and then all of a sudden it shifts. Ulefi sha'ar hadibrot. After the opening, which is in anochi 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 le'ohavai u'leshomrei mitzvotai. After the opening, which is in the first person, the Aseret Dibrot move into the third person. Ulefi sha'ar dibrot nimshachot b'dikduk l'shon midaber b'nistar ka'omro ki lo yinakeh ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem vayanach b'yom hashvi'i al kain beirach vayikadshehu asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach. Hiskimu she'anochi v'lo yelecha mipi hagvura. Anochi and lo yelecha is, as Rav Yonasan says, a koteret. Or as Rav Yoel said, it's a koteret. It means it's short for that whole section that is said that Hashem speaks in the first person, and that's the meaning of mipi hagvura shama'u. That they heard it directly in the first person from Hashem, not in the third person, but in the first person. And that's clearly, Rav Hasdai Crescas says, that's what the Gemara is talking about. The Gemara is talking about that you look at the Aseret Dibrot, and you see immediately that there's a shift from the beginning where Hashem speaks in the first person to the conclusion where Hashem speaks in the third person. And that's the difference between that we heard it directly, right? Mipi hagvura shema'um. We heard it directly, mipi hagvura.
It's 5 psikim. It's 5 psikim.
Right.
It's like a teret for 4 psikim.
4 psukim. The first 4 psukim of Aseret Dibrot are spoken in the first person. and that's what the Gemara means when it says. Of course, now we have the question: well, where do we get the two mitzvot?
Yeah.
And that's.
But even the Rambam also agrees that that's what the Gemara means. But they still think that this is the two
Oh,
mitzvot,
but
right?
we don't know what the Rambam thinks, because the Rambam never makes.
Why should you think different?
No reason why you should think different,
Right.
except that he doesn't say it, and except that, as Rav Hasdai quote says, when you count up how many mitzvot the Rambam has, if you want to say that we're counting Rambam's mitzvot, how many mitzvot do you have in that section?
It's more than two.
Five.
You have 5.
More than
You have an extra.
adds
You have an
up.
extra 3 mitzvot.
It adds up to
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's just see him how he.
So how would you say? How does the Rambam say Mipia Gvir Shemani?
Well,
It means only a Neuchi v'lo Eliyach.
right. That seems to be what the
Only
Rambam
the-
is saying. Okay. ולפי שכל המחברים מונע אזהרות ראו, actually the bottom line, if you want to see the bottom line, I have it in note number 8, right? Right, the first thing to notice is lo yeh lecha hu dibur o diber, right? There's a difference in English between a commandment with a big C and a commandment with a small c. A commandment with a big C is a diber or a dibur, and the commandment with a small c is a mitzvah. So, lo yeh lecha hu dibur velo diber. According to Rav Ḥasdai Crescas, the pasuk lo yeh lecha Elohim acharim al panai is a diber, or it's the beginning of a diber. It's part of the diber, but it's not a mitzvah. Ve'ilu lo ta'aseh lecha pesel, right? Velo tishtachaveh lahem. Those are his 2 mitzvot. Rav Ḥasdai Crescas in that whole section. What did you say?